Yeah, we got to start out with a little Brazilian music. I know, really, the runoff election yesterday, although Lula pulled out a win, it wasn't a big enough win. So we're a little worried about that. But, go Lula. And, I mean, we can only have so many madmen running countries, right? There should be some kind of UN cap on this, like how many crazy people can be in charge of a sovereign nation, of, various sovereign nations. And I think we're over the cap right now. I haven't sort of done a back of the envelope calculation, but I think we are. All right. So, first of all, this is Ask or Tell Me Anything. That means we have no guests booked. Boy, it really is warm in the studio. Our studios have been sort of fantastically cold to a point where we've actually had to have Cat Pastor, choppered out in LifeStar several times because she just got so cold. But I feel like we might have overcorrected. I don't know. Either that or I'm overdressed. Anyway, the number is 888-720-WNPR. We don't have any guests today. We don't have any plan today. What do we have, actually? We have nothing. 888-720-9677. That's not true. We got Lily Tyson, our senior producer, in there screening calls, a job that Mr. McPants typically does, but he has an airborne respiratory infection, otherwise known as a cold, from his suddenly school-aged little boy. And we got Cat Pastor as our technical producer. We're going to be fine, but the number is 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677. And we might as well get going with it. Oh, it's Dave. It's Dave from Lake Como, Ohio, the beautiful Italianate resort area of Ohio. Hi, Dave.
Yes, indeed. Hi, Colin. Nice to speak with you, and thanks for taking my call. As I'm sure I think my topic really fits here. I'm very happy it fits your kind of wider casting of the net, as opposed to trivia. As all your listeners know, I'm sure a new lawsuit was filed Thursday in federal court by Connecticut and national pro-gun types, and they're seeking to overturn the ban on, assault weapons, whatever you want to call them, AR-15s. They call them sporting stuff. But anyway, even though Attorney General Tong made a very stout statement about how he was going to defend this to the last and so forth, I wonder how many other people besides me just had a nasty feeling in the pit of the stomach that despite all efforts, this is just not going to go well.
Well, I mean, I think nasty feelings in the pit of one's stomach are entirely warranted. I mean, generally speaking these days, and specifically speaking on this, and you're going to see a lot of actions like this across the country because they have been emboldened by the Supreme Court decision on the New York law. But it's especially significant here in Connecticut because we have an unusually strong set of gun laws post Sandy Hook. This is one of them, the one that you're talking about. And, they know anyway that if they could get it all the way to the end of the road, there's a pot of gold waiting there, right? They know if they could, it's a long and difficult and highly selective process to get to the Supreme Court. And there's some bumps along the way, and there's some cases that they might lose along the way. But they know it is possible to strike down what would appear to be pretty sensible, locally generated, state sovereignty-based gun laws. So people should be worried about that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also fitting, Dave, from Lake Como that you're calling today. It's the first Monday of October. That means the Supreme Court is in session right now. We know that they are that sort of 6-vote conservative majority is very emboldened from last year. And as Ruth Marcus wrote to the Washington Post, they're impatient, too. They've been waiting a long time to get 6 votes and not have to depend on some flippy-floppy Republican like, Kennedy or now even, Chief Justice Roberts. They could just bring it. They got the 5. Maybe they've got 6. And so, I mean, I don't know that there's a really strong gun case on the docket this year. But we're going to, until this particular phase of American history is over, we are going to see a lot of stuff like this.
Yeah. Living in a state, as you know, where there are no prohibitions on concealed or any other type of carry. There's no background checks required. All you have to be is, 19 years old and allowed to go get, a rocket launcher if you want it. Connecticut is like this shining beacon of sensible laws, and we are trying like crazy to get back there within the next couple of years permanently, and this is part of the whole picture. If this goes away, and of course that would mean no state in the union is going to have gun laws that are going to hold up if Connecticut's go down. It's going to be tough to bear.
Right. I mean, if you look at the last session of the Supreme Court, and I'm speaking very simplistically and broadly right now, but it's sort of hard not to see this as kind of an outcome-seeking court as opposed to one that's following any particular poll star. So you had on the one hand the reproductive rights, the abortion decision, Dobbs, which basically said there shouldn't be any federal guarantees of anything. It's all, up to the states. And then you had the New York State decision, which was saying nothing should be up to the states. We should decide all of this kind of at the level of federal fiat. So, basically it's whichever way they want the case to turn out seems to be what guides them. And that used to be called judicial activism. It used to be something that was a critique of conservatives against liberal judges. I don't know. If this isn't judicial activism, I don't know what it is. But Dave, It has been very pleasant to visit with you. We can't wait for you to move back here. Although when you move back here, I will be a little sad because there will be nobody in Lake Como who wants to call me. So I think before Dave moves back to Connecticut, he has to find a successor on the gleaming shores of Lake Como, Ohio. Which may be difficult because there is no such place. All right, so let's go. We have another Dave. We're not going to go all Dave today, all right? But we could do that. We could do a show where we only took calls from people named Dave. I have 3 close friends that I can think of named David, although I don't think any of them is a Dave. No, none of them. They're all Davids. All right, here's Dave from New Britain. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, Colin. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Okay.
I have a local Connecticut pop cultural question for you. I want to know your take and your theory on this. Now, I grew up in Connecticut in the 1970s, and the TV show Hee Haw, which was a country music variety show, was so wildly popular in central Connecticut and basically all over Connecticut, especially among ethnic Connecticut people that had grandparents that came over from Italy or Poland or Russia. And what's your take and theory why it was so popular here? The ratings were through the roof. I mean, Connecticut was their number one market for the TV show Hee Haw.
I didn't know that about Connecticut, but I believe you because you have the air of sincerity in saying that. But I will say this. Look, cultural elites, a term that I invoke, not entirely seriously, but cultural elites often don't understand why country music is popular. And country music is popular kind of everywhere. I mean, if you go to, I've been in towns, like good-sized towns in Ireland, on nights where it was easy to walk into 2 or 3 different live music venues and hear essentially American country music, and much harder to find the place that had a traditional Irish music. It's popular everywhere. So that's number one. And I wasn't a big Hee Haw fan, but it was Buck Owens, and who was the other host there? Was it Earl Scruggs? It was somebody like that. They had sort of good musicians on there, and those, and actually, Connecticut does have kind of a country music tradition here. It's not really the kind of thing you associate with Connecticut. But maybe the other portion of your point, and the late Bruce Fraser, who was the chairman of the Connecticut Council on the Humanities and stuff like that, he used to say that the kind of Hollywoodized or even sort of media image of Connecticut is wrong, right? The media image of Connecticut is it's John Cheever, it's Katharine Hepburn, it's all these kind of pointy-headed, overeducated people taking commuter trains to get home to their first, second, and third dry martinis, and that really Connecticut's a pretty urban state. We do, as you suggest, have a lot of ethnic minorities. The waves of ethnic migration have come to Connecticut as they have anywhere else. But, maybe if you go back 120 years or so, even more so, this is a place where you had significant waves of ethnic migration, Irish, Italians, Jews, all coming here from Europe. And so, also country music is the music of the working class. We have a working class here in Connecticut. I don't know. I don't think it's a little bit of a surprise to me if it's really true that Hee Haw was more popular here than it was in Mississippi or something. But on the other hand, another way to look at it is you don't really have to go very far out of your way in the South and Southwest to hear country music. Whereas in Connecticut, you might actually have to tune in hee-haw if you want to hear Buck Owens sing, "I've got a tiger by the tail, it's plain to see." That's my answer. What do you think?
That's a great answer. I think, too, is that we saw people on TV that didn't look like people in Connecticut. We were very ethnic looking in Connecticut. And we saw people that were blonde or, it was like a phenomenon. I mean, it was a pop cultural sensation. It was like an escape every Sunday to see that. And you learn new songs that you really didn't hear on the radio that much, too.
That's absolutely true. By the way, Lily Tyson, our senior producer, often referred to as the Patsy Cline of Barkhamsted, informs me that it was Buck Owens and Roy Clark. That's it. Roy Clark was the
right.
host. And you had, what is the name of the lady with the, was it Fanny Flagg? Who was the woman who had like the price tag? No, it was Minnie Pearl. Minnie Pearl. Yeah, she had the price tag coming off her hat and stuff like that. I don't know. It was sort of corny jokes. It was, as you say, it's, typically, there's not a strong WEXT. I think for a while in Connecticut was a country station. We have country stations from time to time, and I guess 92.5 or something. I think that's a country station right now. But yeah, there's not a lot of it around. So yeah, that's another reason. I think also there's a way in which a show like Hee Haw is kind of a refuge from everything that we associate with Connecticut too. It's like, okay, I like to take a break from Connecticut and watch people tell really stupid jokes. Not really stupid jokes. That's not fair. Kind of corny jokes. And play their banjos and guitars. I love the question, though, Dave. It's like probably going to be my favorite question of the day.
Thank you. Oh, it's great talking to you, Colin.
Great to talk to you, too, Dave. I've got a tiger by the tail, it's plain to see. I won't be much when you get through with me. I don't know the rest of the song. All right. Okay, I think this is going to be a more serious call. Here's Heather from Waterbury. By the way, if you want to call in, because we have lots of open lines today, and I don't know if people were even expecting this opportunity, the number is 888-720-WNPR. And I'll say this more slowly and less alphanumerically, 888-720-9677. And you can actually call in and ask a broad philosophical question. For example, you could say, Colin, why is life a grotesque pantomime? Or you could also, Dave number one, Dave from Lake Como said no trivia. That's not true. You can ask trivia. You just can't ask me really hard questions that I don't know the answer to, which would be a lot of questions, actually. Here is Heather from Waterbury. Hi, Heather. You have the floor.
Hi, and oh my goodness, I hope I'm not asking you a too hard of a question that you don't know the answer, but you're a plethora of knowledge, so I figured I'd ask.
I am a plethora.
Okay, so my daughter is desperately searching housing. What's the state of the housing rental situation in Connecticut? She's on Section 8, and she is having such a difficult time.
Yeah, especially with Section 8. I think, it's super, super difficult. Now, some of the problem, if she's on Section 8, is, as has been kind of well and extensively covered here in Connecticut, there's just a lot of communities that will do almost anything to keep affordable housing out. They just see affordable housing as not a net win for them. You may have noticed that Bob Stefanowski in his campaign was talking about overturning 830G or whatever that provision is about affordable housing. So, yeah, first of all, structurally in Connecticut, it's not set up for young people without a tremendous amount of means to be able to rent. And that can be part of our doom. We've been asking ourselves for years, why do we have net population losses? Why can't we keep young people in the state? Why do they go to high school here, then go to college, and then they won't come back? Well, I think your daughter's probably a pretty good example. One reason they don't come back is we make it super difficult for them to find anything affordable here. So yeah. And then, the other thing that drove this, obviously, is during the pandemic, there were more and more people who were, for various reasons, less interested in urban environments. And certainly this is true for some of the younger millennials and some of the older Gen Zers, this was the goal for a long time. Get to a city, get to a really interesting, exciting city. And then I think during the pandemic, that lost a little bit of its luster. So I think there's, a little bit of a supply and demand issue.
And, it's really hard to navigate all of the, she's got autism and she's on the spectrum and she's developmentally really low. And it's really hard to navigate all of the paperwork and everything. I'm trying to help her and I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I can't even figure out some of this stuff. It's these things are put in place to help people, but then for the people that they help, it makes it so difficult. They have to jump through hoops.
Right. So one thing I'll say, Heather, is I'll kind of put it out there because there are housing advocacy groups. In fact, there's one that I've even I think I gave their annual address one year, but I can't bring the name of it to mind right now. But there are groups. If anybody hears this and they have a suggestion, because what it sounds like what you guys need is some kind of mediation, some kind of mediating factor. Somebody who could sort of step in and say, yes, I know how to do this. I know how to get through this paperwork. It's second nature to me. She's not on disability or anything. She just has Section 8 housing. So
right. We don't have anyone to help us.
Well, maybe you do though. What congressional district does either she or she doesn't? I could maybe have a place to live right now. Who would be a relevant congressperson, either for you or for her?
I'm not sure. Maybe Jahana Hayes. I don't know right. Congress. I'm not sure who that is, but I know that she's in our district and
Yeah. So if you're in Waterbury, it would be Jahana Hayes, I believe. And so you could start there. One thing that members of Congress do is they have constituent services. Now, there's a wide variety of competence in that whole area, and I don't know anything about Jahana Hayes' Connecticut staff or anything, but I would call her district office and see if there's anybody there who can help with the paperwork and stuff like that, because that's what they're there for. It's a big part of why they're there. And I certainly, in Section 8's a federal program, so once again, this may be a really terrible suggestion. You may not get anywhere. But I would do it anyway. I would if you can. The first thing you've got to do is identify what specifically is the problem. The problem is availability of Section 8. But when it comes to the paperwork, the stuff that's really hard to navigate for you to help your daughter, it seems to me if you could sort of write down in a couple of clear sentences what that problem is and then call, you're more likely to get the help that you need, or to be told, oh no, we don't know how to help you with that. But there are housing advocacy groups around the state too. I don't know I don't know Waterbury that well. I don't know the 5th District that well. But I would say ask for help. It's the thing we always forget to do is ask for help. So so that may not. You asked me for help, and I'm totally useless. But that can't be helped. All right. So our number. I have several things to tell you. 888-720-WNPR. That's the number you would call if you wanted to ask or tell me anything. 888-720-9677. I should mention that I have here a bundle of Mr. Karp envelopes. I don't have time to explain all this, but because I have to explain it every time, and that's cumbersome. But Mr. Karp, just accept the fact that Mr. Karp is possibly the smartest person in the world. Until somebody else comes along and dislodges him, or, he's somewhere. He's in the conversation. That's what we would say. Mr. Karp is somewhere in the conversations for smartest person in the world. And one of the things that he does, and I realize this doesn't necessarily seem like an activity that the smartest person in the world would do, but he clips things out of publications, out of physical publications. He puts them in physical envelopes, which he has repurposed. I've never received any kind of mail from Mr. Karp that was in an envelope that he bought for the purpose of mailing something to me, despite the fact that Mr. Karp has done very well in life. He could afford a new envelope if he wanted one. Anyway, he clips things out. He underlines them. I'm just saying, if you get bored with me or whatever, you can call me and just say, please open one of the Mr. Karp envelopes. Or you can say the code words. If you say either pineapple or platypus, it's especially good if you work them into a sentence. That means I have to open a Mr. Karp envelope. And then when I do, the way it works is I have to discuss what's inside. And I don't know. People don't believe it, but I'm standing here I could show it to Lily, but she's looking at the screen right now. But it's like I have these envelopes. They're here, and they're sealed. I don't know what's in them. And they're another opportunity for me to fail at this. All right. So, very excited. This is my first day back. I was off all last week. So it's exciting to come back here and test myself. All right, let's talk to Levi. Levi in West Hartford. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, Colin. Your first caller got me thinking that you're right. It's interesting that the Supreme Court seems happy to put gun laws as something managed on the federal level, and abortion laws as something that's managed by the states. And it strikes me that one reason why this might be so is that there are a lot of people who take the Second Amendment very, very seriously. But if we look back at Roe and we remember that this was an implied right under the Ninth Amendment, no one takes the Ninth Amendment seriously anymore.
Right. I think that's fair. And that's why when I was saying that before, I was saying this is a very broad and simplistic statement for exactly the reason that you're saying. It's not as though that they can't come up with some kind of rationale for the difference between guaranteeing and solidifying a right at the federal level and weakening the federal right on a different, in a different area of life. But you're right; they're not equivalents. I mean, for better or worse,
they should be. Yeah. They should be. But the problem is that even the liberal justices, they might have taken the Ninth Amendment less seriously than the conservative ones. God help us. I mean, one of the cases that deeply concerns me today that no one will talk about, where it seems like it should be clear in the Constitution, is the Castro Huerta case that was resolved last season. Castro Huerta wasn't a great defendant. He abused a child, but he did it on a Native American reservation, and the Supreme Court said that the state of Oklahoma could go in and prosecute him for things he had done on the sovereign territory of a Native American nation. This was something that was mostly decided by the conservatives. And I mean, it bothers me because this, that the way we relate to sovereign Native nations within the U.S. borders isn't yet a totally partisan and stupid issue. It's something where people can still think about it without having to worry about offending party lines. But when I wrote to my legislators about it, I got letters back about Dobbs. So even our legislators aren't thinking about it. And I'd like to encourage listeners to look into the Castro Huerta case.
Right. And I don't know that much about that case, but I do know that one of the so there was a previous decision called McGirt that had gone the other way on tribal sovereignty. And when Ginsburg went off the court and Coney Barrett replaced Ginsburg, that's when Oklahoma filed. And that's a pattern I think you're going to see. It's the thing I was saying about the CCDL lawsuit here in Connecticut too. If they know, there's a different set of votes on the court, then people seeking or interests, entities seeking a certain kind of outcome will look for a new case. I mean, and sure, that probably works both ways. In fact, it definitely works both ways. I mean, the day that there's a 6-3 liberal majority on the court, you're going to see a lot of filings to pursue gains that can be reaped from a set of votes like that. But it's certainly, you're absolutely right that, and I haven't really followed that case, but you're right that it's a landmark case in terms of kind of reversing essentially centuries of thinking about tribal sovereignty. It is a hard case to argue from the side that you and I might argue it from for the reason that you said. It's an unsympathetic defendant, but that's supposed to not get in the way of appellate questions like this. So anyway, interesting call. We will take a break right now. And we have lots of calls here. And all right, it looks very interesting. I'm just doing primary process. You're just hearing me look at the call board. We'll take a break. We'll come right back.
fais le penser. Pense positivité, pense positivité, pense positivité, pense positivité. Ne te prends pas trop la tête.
I get to pick out the music for these shows. I'm just telling you. It brings me happiness. All right. So welcome to another Ask or Tell Me Anything. We're having a lot of fun here. 888-720-WNPR. That's 888-720-9677. That would be the number that you could call if you wanted to speak on the air. Boy, they all look very interesting. But I'm going to, for reasons connected to my own prejudices, go to Rick from Bethany. Hi, Rick. You're on the air.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Good.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How do we know God has a sense of humor?
I know that the answer that you're going to come up with, but I think that if we know that God has a sense of humor, it's because we have a sense of humor. I actually, in my week off, I thought a lot about this. Not just about this, but, what does it mean? Because I was at the ocean. I was up in Wellfleet, and I would walk along the ocean every day and stare at it. And when you do that, you start thinking about talking to God anyway, because the sky is so big and the ocean is so vast. And I was going through some various family crises and stuff, and I was sort of asking God questions about that. And because life seems incredibly hard a lot of the time. In fact, let me also just sort of deviate and say that we're, as of this morning, thinking about doing a show about that very question. Like, why is life so hard? How should we respond philosophically to how hard life is? There's a new book out called, in fact, Life is Hard. Let's see, Life is Hard, How Philosophy Can Help Us Find Our Way by Kiran Satya. And I was reading a review of that in the Los Angeles Review of Books this morning, thinking, we should just do a show about that. Because, from the time of kind of the clash between Schopenhauer and Leibniz, we've been asking ourselves these questions for a long time. But I do believe that if there's a God and if we have a sense of humor, that means God gave us a sense of humor. Probably because he was going to throw so much horrible crap at us. But anyway, you have a more succinct answer, I believe.
Well, the question I had was, of course, how do we know God has a sense of humor? And it's because he gave us the platypus.
All right. So that means you have to open a Mr. Karp envelope. I'm going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 7.
2.
2. All right. This number envelope. I have quite a few Mr. Karp envelopes here. You're going to open number 2 one. Well, this has been very, very carefully sealed. All right. Let's see what we're going to get out of here. I think this is Lily Tyson's first experience with a Mr. Karp envelope being opened on the air, and it's also a little tension. A little bit of a tension convention here because I think there's only one clip in here, so it's whatever it is. Whatever it is, I got to be able to do it. And it looks like it's hard to tell which things he is tactically underlined. It looks like it says Fourth Estate. What publication is this? This is from Hartford Business. You never know what publications Mr. Karp gets. Amid news industry struggles, CT's media landscape faces significant changes. And then he's underlined various things about Connecticut Magazine, about how Hearst has aggressively poached former Hartford Courant reporters and editors. I would be sort of theoretically one of those people who was poached. So this is mostly about the
gutting of our local media.
Yeah, the gutting of our local media or the reconfiguring of our local media. Because, yes, obviously, traditional legacy media is unbelievably challenged. Although I think if you look at Connecticut in its entirety, you have to sort of say that, well, there was no New Haven Independent, there was no Connecticut Mirror, there was no CT News Junkie when all this got started. Back in the 90s, when, and what was happening back in the 90s was a lot of legacy news executives, the people who were running big newspapers in Connecticut and probably the people running big TV stations. And I have to say kind of a lot of the people here in public broadcasting, although not all of them, but in the 90s, all of them, they were like people standing on the beach at Phuket, watching a tidal wave coming towards them and sort of saying, do you think we'll get wet? I don't think, no, I think we probably won't get wet from this. I mean, this is an enormous tidal wave coming towards you. So And so they didn't prepare. They didn't get the sandbags. They didn't move off the beach, and they got swamped. And so you have legacy publications like the Hartford Courant, America's oldest daily newspaper and continuous publication, that were eviscerated, partly because of the digital revolution, and then because of its acquisition by increasingly rapacious owners who were less and less interested in restocking the shelves and more interested in just eating up all the canned beans and throwing everything else in recycle. So, but there's a lot of innovation too. Like this company, Connecticut Public, we now have one of the larger newsrooms in the state. When I first got here, you couldn't come close to saying something like that. But we have an investigative unit here. We have a pretty large reporting staff, a bunch of editors. At one point, we had more photographers working here than the Hartford Courant, which is funny if you think of us as primarily either a radio or a TV entity. What do we need photographers for? But the people who are running this place right now are committed to making us, a significant journalistic force. And, Hearst ultimately did not take this stuff lying down. I mean, this is another one of my employers, but, they ultimately decided that they were going to beef up and they were going to try to, kind of corner certain markets. And then really the work done by the independents, what Paul Bass did with the New Haven Independent, that's a model to the nation. It's something that's looked at by the other 49 states. And I think CT News Junkie and Connecticut Mirror, these are really good, really fine platforms. They have narrower objectives. What we really lost, Rick, you're going to be sorry you had me open this envelope, but I'll stop being boring. What we really lost was generalism. When I got out of college, I went to work for the Hartford Courant. I worked there for 19 years. And what you had was a really large reporting staff that included a lot of generalists and also a commitment to being the information equivalent of a supermarket, I mean, we had a classical music critic, we had a really large and strong arts and culture staff. We had a very strong and well-staffed lifestyle department. And then we had reporters all over the state. We had bureaus all over the state. I almost went to the Groton Bureau when I was hired by the Hartford Courant. And so all of that stuff kind of had to go away. And the mission shrank down. And I think one of the things that really has been hurt the most, I think the Patch.coms, the hyperlocals, they've stepped in and done, pretty decent job of covering some of the towns. All the institutions that I just talked about before, I think, are covering government and politics and stuff like that really well. Actually, I think the biggest hurt was the arts and culture. And we try to do some stuff here, and Ray Hardman definitely is like taking a lead, and giving us some really great arts reporting, but he's one human being. And really there isn't the kind of thing that we used to have. There are some fine people doing some hard work at a lot of different publications, but there aren't enough. And I think the idea of having an arts community where you have journalism being done about it, where you have plays being reviewed by, I worked for a critic named Malcolm Johnson who could have been a theater critic anywhere. That's the thing that we kind of lost. And it's kind of sad. But you know what? Change is the only constant, right?
Constant.
All right, I gotta go. But pet a platypus for me, and thanks for your call. I'll just go up this line here. Is that what I should do? I have no idea. All right. So So Evelyn goes with Rick from Bethany, I think. I mean, not in a personal way, but so Evelyn from Plantsville, you're on the air.
Hi, Colin. I'm quite disturbed about an article that I read in the Hartford Courant about the town of Wethersfield considering using part of their $8 million COVID relief package to develop a sports complex. I wonder if you have any comment on that. There's just so much more they can do with that money to, especially the school systems that need to be updated with air filtration, buying computers, setting up, alternative means of education. My son, was in the middle of that COVID when he was a junior at a tech school, and he lost so much, a year and a half of, losing the ability to learn his trade because of the, it was an emergency, nobody knew what to do. I know it's a little settled now and everybody's tired of hearing about COVID-19, but I'm just outraged, and I'm surprised that the people of Wethersfield aren't outraged about using that money for a sports complex rather than what it was supposed to do.
Well, so there's a lot there. And first of all, have to say, I didn't read that article. I don't know about this. And I also don't know how the regs that were written for the disbursement of that money map onto the situation that you're talking about. I will say that if you look around the rest of the country, there's some risk associated with these things. Brett Favre and some other people in Mississippi are being tried right now, being prosecuted right now for appropriating anti-poverty money for things like women's volleyball facilities. Multi-billion-dollar.
I read that. Yeah.
So you got to be careful how you use this money. It does come with specs about what you can do with it. I think first of all, you've said most of what I would say, which is that anybody who thinks that the mission is over is nuts. And even if you thought that COVID-19 was over, which it is not. I think we're about to have a fourth wave. Some of the early indicators, the leading indicators, ranging from wastewater here to spikes over in the United Kingdom, which seems to once again be a little bit ahead of us in a bad way. A lot of indications to me are with the school year resuming, windows closing because of the cold weather, and variants that haven't really been effectively dealt with, and an underboosted American population. I mean, we're pretty good here in Connecticut, but it's like 33% of Americans nationwide have had anything that you could call a booster shot, even one booster shot months and months and months ago. That's incredibly low. And obviously the fact that Connecticut's better is good, but really, this is a big swimming pool. So if you pee in Oklahoma, it's going to get over here somehow. I mean, nobody's safe until everybody's safe. So that you're right. And filtration, the whole HVAC component, air exchange, and filtration is incredibly important. In terms of non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs as they're called, masking seems to be kind of dead, at least as a mandate. It's now a personal choice and one that you're kind of over-scrutinized for if you make it. The next line is spending a lot of money on air systems. And even if you thought COVID-19 was over, something else is coming. I mean, we're probably going to have a pretty tough respiratory year this year, just generally speaking, between that. Some of the epidemiologists think flu is going to be worse this time around. And there's just like other stuff coming. There's other bugs already out there. And God knows, SARS-CoV-2 is not the last fatal virus that we'll see in our lifetimes. So, spend the money where you're supposed to spend it. I know everybody loves to spend money on sports. I was one of the people who, had to fight with people about bringing the New England Patriots to Hartford, Connecticut, and paying just this insane amount of money to do it. And people are always willing to spend. People who object to the government spending money on basic kinds of things, to lift children out of poverty. They hate stuff like that. But, a $1.6 billion sports facility, oh, fine. If to get the NFL here, we should definitely do it. So, I don't know. I feel your pain, but I don't know what else to say about it. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I do have to go to a break. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but we do need a break right here. We will come back. We have calls. I won't even get out the phone number at the moment because we do have a lot of calls. And so it's Ask or Tell Me Anything. I'll talk to you on the other side of this. All right, we are back. It's time to say some thank yous. Kat Pastor is our producer, our technical producer today and most days, and we're happy about that. Lily Tyson is our senior producer. She's not typically the person here screening calls. That would be Mr. McPants. But Lily Tyson, as we have discovered, can do anything. In fact, that should be sort of an auxiliary piece of the Ask or Tell Me Anything shows. I mean, you have to ask or tell me things, but you could also ask Lily Tyson to perform some feat of strength or competence, something like that. We'll work on that. It's hard to figure out how to incorporate it into the format, but it's definitely a thing. All right. So, a couple of things. Well, actually, I can do this while I talk to Adrienne. So why don't we do that? Wait a minute. No, that's not.
Colin.
Hi, Adrienne. Actually, you're not the person I'm going to talk to about this, but say your thing.
Thank you. So I think we're playing nuclear chicken with Russia, and we've got to stop that. We're in denial that something could happen. We're hoping it doesn't. That's not good enough. And I think as the developers of the bomb and the droppers of the bomb in Japan, it's incumbent upon us to go to the table first and say, okay, nuclear disarmament total is on the table. We have to do it now. And if for people on, let's say, the Republican side of the divide, remember that it was Reagan and Gorbachev, that almost got there.
Mm-hmm.
And the objection was that we wouldn't budge on Star Wars. So I think we have to do this now. We can't just hope nothing happens.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, there's a world difference between Gorbachev and this fellow Putin.
Of course there is.
And that's the difficulty.
The Reagan portion of it.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, it's hard to negotiate something like nuclear disarmament while hostilities are ongoing, because you're essentially asking Putin, who's probably not a reasonable person about this under the best of circumstances, to sort of say, all right, take your ace in the hole and put it down on the table and don't pick it up again. I think it is going to be hard. I agree that it is a game of nuclear chicken. I don't know. I think also you never quite know what kinds of safeguards there are in any kind of country. I mean, one of the things that shocked me was Radiolab a few years ago did an entire episode about what restrictions exist, what kinds of fail-safe mechanisms exist should a somewhat irrational president decide that he wanted to launch a nuclear preemptive strike or something like that. I wonder why that topic occurred to them. But anyway, what they found was none, basically. It is, unless some general decides to essentially break a rule. I mean, our house is not in order either. Our house is set up for a disaster of this kind. But I mean, what you need is you need an electorate. You need a population. In all nuclear powers, in all states that are nuclear powers, you need voters, and you need you need the common electorate to want this enough to put pressure on their leaders. Those places where there is anything resembling free and fair elections, which might not even be here anymore. Anyway, all right. So running out of time here, but here's Mary Jane in North Stonington. I could say more about that nuclear chicken stuff, but I think I've talked about it here in the past as well. But here's Mary Jane. Hi, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Colin. I just wanted to suggest two topics for shows, and one is what is fascism? I think fascism allows you to own things, property or other things, whereas, say, communism, you don't really own anything because the state owns everything. But you have such a deep, you have so many people that like history and politics. I think that people could perhaps call in with good definitions of fascism. And then also book censorship, which is becoming popular, and maybe some of the stuff about why that's happening.
Right.
As a retired librarian, I'd like to see some talking about book censorship.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, both of those things a little bit in the past. I can't remember whether we ever did a full fascism show. I guess we didn't. There's a guy, he's an academic, I think somewhere in the Beltway area, at a university somewhere in the Beltway area, who, I'm blocking his name right now, but he has this kind of fascism checklist where, like, there's certain criteria, and if you meet enough of them, you have a fascist state or a fascist leader. And he wrote one piece for the Washington Post about this years ago, and then when Trump came in, he kind of updated his fascism checklist, and he went through it to see to what degree it applied to Trump. So if we did the fascism show, I would definitely want to have that guy on. So I would have to remember his name.
I think that would be interesting with the election in Italy.
Yep.
And some of this funny stuff that's sort of in the air about fascist type groups that like the style. They like the style of marching around. And it kind of appeals maybe to young people.
Yeah, that's
it's
really good.
New on the horizon.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And Lily Tyson is in there nodding. I think to you. And you just even described this. There's something that is now referred to in all reaches of National Public Radio. They talk about it at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. It's known as the Lily Tyson pivot. And that's when you take a topic like fascism and then you turn it suddenly in the middle of the show or towards the end of the show, like to that what you just said, the fascist aesthetic, the fascist fashion, the way in which there might be something visually or stylistically appealing about fascism to certain people. I do, as long as you've brought all this stuff, want to mention some things that we're doing. Tomorrow we have a show about lists. And that's all I'm going to say about it because I haven't done my homework yet. But one that a lot of you might be interested in, including you, Mary Jane from North Stonington, unless a mountain lion has eaten you since I hung up or I put you on hold, because they have mountain lions in North Stonington if they have them anywhere. But we're doing a show. We had this conversation out on my deck a few weeks ago. About what we were going to do during this election season, because our show is a little weird and we don't necessarily cover politics or anything else the way we're supposed to. And we wound up talking about whether you can make a compelling argument for people to care about politics. Is there a reason to care about it? Or are people so enervated and so discouraged by the polarization and the just gridlocking of everything that it's pretty hard to make an argument that you should care about politics? And in the middle of having this conversation, where I was just depressing the crap out of everybody with sort of making that or asking that question, Bill Curry, two-time candidate for governor, many other things. He happened to be calling me about something else, and I put him on speakerphone, and I said, tell all the producers why we should care about politics. And he gave a very eloquent speech about, I can't remember what he said because I don't usually listen while he's talking. But I know that he said something very powerful. And it kind of got us thinking, we're going to do that show on Thursday. We're going to do a show just on that question of why should you care about politics? What's the case for it? I think we know the case against it. What's the case for it? So we've got all of that coming up, and we're going to do the news on Friday. And we're also working on some other kind of politically oriented shows. We don't have one on fascism on the pipeline. We have sort of the opposite show. Lily and I are also working on a show about centrism, which I think. And David French wrote over the weekend, the real divide isn't between left and right. It's between centrism and extremism. All right, we have to stop there. Thanks for asking and telling me everything. And we say goodbye now. Thanks.